I swung the axe down hard, the blade biting into the oak with a crack that echoed through the misty dawn. Wood chips flew like startled birds, my arms burning from the effort. But I didn't stop, not with the sheriff's horse snorting behind me, his deputy watching from the saddle like I was some wild animal he'd come to collar. The tree groaned, teetering, and I thought of Pa's stories about the Blackstones, how every generation birthed one with blood on their hands. A curse whispered in the cornfields. Was it my turn? The trunk split, crashing into the underbrush, and I wiped sweat from my brow, tasting the metallic tang of fear. Elias, my younger brother, emerged from the cabin door, his face pale as milk, clutching the rifle Pa had left us. "They found her, Jed," he said, voice cracking. "Ma's gone. Hung herself in the barn, they say. But the rope? It was cut." The deputy's boot hit the dirt as he dismounted, hand on his holster. "Boy, you're coming with us. Witnesses saw you arguing last night." My grip tightened on the axe handle. Argue? I'd begged her to tell me the truth about the family secret, the one that made Uncle Harlan vanish into the river 10 years back. Now this. The sheriff nodded toward the tree line where shadows lingered like accusations. "And Jedediah Blackstone, we got questions about that knife in her chest too." The lantern's flame flickered as I shoved the barn door open, the wood groaning like a dying man's last breath. Dust motes swirled in the dim light, and there she was, Elias's sister Mary, huddled against a stall, her skirts muddied and torn. Her eyes, wide and wild, locked onto mine, but she didn't scream. No, she just clutched that small bundle tighter to her chest, as if it could shield her from whatever hell had chased her here. "Reverend?" Her voice cracked barely above a whisper. I knelt beside her, my knees sinking into the straw, heart pounding from the sprint across the fields. The Blackstone farm lay silent under the moon, too silent after the shotgun blast that had echoed like judgment from on high. "What happened, Mary?" "Elias, I couldn't finish." The image of his body slumped in the doorway burned fresh, blood pooling around his head like spilled ink. She shook her head, tears carving tracks through the grime on her face. "It wasn't him. Not this time. Pa, he came at me with the axe. Said the bloodline demanded it. Every generation one killer to keep the devil's bargain." Her words tumbled out, frantic as she unwrapped the bundle just enough to reveal a swaddled infant, no more than a few weeks old, its tiny fists balled in sleep. "This is Elias's boy. Born wrong, they say. Marked." I reached out, but she pulled back, suspicion hardening her gaze. I'd known the Blackstones for years, preached at their funerals, baptized their young, but the rumors clung like damp rot. Whispers of graves disturbed, of kin vanishing into the woods, always pinned on the eldest son. Elias had been different, though, quieter, with a spark of kindness that made me think the curse might skip him. Foolish hope. Footsteps crunched outside, heavy and deliberate. I doused the lantern, plunging us into shadow. Mary's breath hitched as a silhouette filled the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered. The old man himself, Jeremiah Blackstone, axe still gripped in one meaty hand, its blade dark with fresh gore. "Girl," he growled, voice like gravel under boots. "You can't run from it. The line needs thinning. Always has." I pressed a hand over Mary's mouth, my other fumbling for the pistol tucked in my belt. The weight of it felt foreign, a sinner's tool for a man of God, but tonight prayers wouldn't suffice. The baby stirred, a soft whimper escaping, and Jeremiah's head snapped toward us. He stepped in, eyes gleaming with that unnatural fervor, the same I'd seen in old portraits of his father, hanging crooked in the parlor. "Reverend Hale," he said, spotting me as moonlight slanted through a crack. "You meddle where you shouldn't. This ain't your flock." I stood slowly, blocking Mary from his view, the pistol half drawn. "It's every man's flock when blood's spilled, Jeremiah. Elias is dead because of you. Put the axe down." He laughed, low and bitter, advancing with a swing that whistled through the air. I dodged, the blade embedding in the stall post with a thud that shook straw from the rafters. Mary scrambled back, clutching the child, her face pale as milk. "You're blind, preacher. The Blackstones been keepers of the dark since the first settler dug that well. Every son born takes the mantle, or dies trying. Elias failed. Now it's the boy's turn." He yanked the axe free, splinters flying, and lunged again. I fired. The shot roared, deafening in the close space, and Jeremiah staggered, clutching his shoulder. Blood bloomed through his shirt, but he didn't fall. Instead, he straightened, a twisted smile splitting his beard. "See? The devil don't yield easy." Mary bolted past me toward the back door, the baby wailing now. I fired again, grazing his leg this time, buying her seconds. She vanished into the night, a shadow fleeing toward the river trail. Jeremiah charged, axe raised, and I met him with the pistol's butt, cracking it against his jaw. We grappled, rolling in the filth, his weight pinning me as his fingers clawed for my throat. "You'll join them all," he rasped, breath hot and foul. Strength born of desperation surged through me. I kneed him hard, twisted free, and brought the pistol down once more, this time on his temple. He slumped unconscious, the axe clattering away. Panting, I staggered to my feet, the barn spinning. Outside, Mary's footsteps faded, but so did the hope of easy answers. The boy, innocent or cursed, was loose in the night, and with him the Blackstone legacy. I had to find her before the old man woke, or worse, before the town roused to the shots and branded us all killers. The lantern's flame flickered as I crouched behind the splintered barn wall, the metallic tang of blood still thick in my nostrils. Pa's body lay twisted in the mud just 20 paces away. His throat opened like a gutted fish, and I could hear the intruder's boots crunching through the wet grass, closing in. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a reminder that the Blackstone curse wasn't some old wives' tale. It was here now, demanding its due. I gripped the hunting knife tighter, its handle slick with sweat, and whispered a prayer that wasn't to God but to whatever dark vein ran through our blood. Eli, my younger brother, huddled beside me, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He was the cautious one, always had been, the boy who'd rather mend fences than break them. "Elias, we can't fight this," he murmured, eyes wide in the dim light. "That man's no poacher. Did you see his eyes? Like Pa's when the fits came on." I shot him a glare, but he was right. The stranger moved with a predator's grace, not the clumsy stagger of a drunk or thief. The night air carried a low hum like distant thunder, but it was the wind through the cornstalks, or maybe something worse, stirring in the earth. I risked a peek over the wall. The intruder paused by Pa's corpse, kneeling to dip a finger in the pooling blood and trace a symbol on the barn door. 3 interlocking circles, the mark from grandmother's forbidden journal. My stomach twisted. I'd found that book hidden under the floorboards just last week, pages yellowed with tales of our line. Every generation, one killer born, bound to spill blood under the harvest moon to keep the family whole. Pa had laughed it off as superstition, but now, the stranger straightened, his face shadowed under a wide-brimmed hat, and turned our way as if he smelled our fear. "Eli, stay low," I hissed, pulling him back as the man advanced. My mind raced. Run to the house for the shotgun? No, too far, and Ma was alone with the baby. Fight? I was brave or foolish enough to pretend it, but this felt like tempting fate. The curse's words echoed in my head. The blood calls to blood. Was this intruder kin? A cousin from the eastern branch, come to claim what Pa wouldn't yield. The man's shadow stretched long across the ground, and I swear it writhed like smoke. He stopped 10 feet away, voice gravelly and calm. "Elias Blackstone? Your father's time was up. The line needs strengthening." Eli whimpered, clutching my arm, but I stood slowly, knife raised. No speeches, no begging. Just the raw urge to survive, to protect what was mine. The moon broke through the clouds then, silvering his blade, and I lunged, the world narrowing to the clash of steel and the promise of more blood on Indiana soil. I gripped the reins tighter as the horse's hooves churned the muddy trail, the lantern swinging wild from the saddle horn like a drunkard's fist. Behind us, Elias's shouts cut through the night, raw, furious, nothing like the measured drawl of the brother I'd grown up shadowing. "You can't run forever, Caleb. The blood calls." His voice echoed off the dense Indiana woods, closer than it should be after we'd put a mile between the old mill and this cursed stretch of riverbank. My heart hammered, not just from the gallop but from the weight of the journal tucked inside my coat, the one Pa had hidden in the barn rafters, its pages yellowed with ink that spelled out our family's shame. Every generation one killer. Not madness, not some fever dream, but a deliberate unmaking of souls. Elias had found it first, or so the frantic note from Cousin Amos suggested before he'd vanished 2 nights back. I'd come to the mill to warn him, only to walk into the aftermath. Blood on the stones, tools scattered like broken teeth, and Elias standing there with that new glint in his eye, the one that turned my stomach. We'd bolted together at first, me and little sister Mira, who'd been hiding in the loft with her slingshot clutched like a talisman. She rode pillion now, her arms locked around my waist, breath hot against my neck. "He won't stop, will he?" she whispered, voice steady despite the tremble I felt in her grip. Brave girl, always had been, the kind who climbed the tallest oaks without a glance down. But this wasn't a game of tag in the fields. This was Elias, 22 and built like an ox, unraveling thread by thread into the monster our bloodline birthed. The trail narrowed, roots snaking across the path like veins. I urged the mare left toward the swollen white river, hoping the current would swallow our tracks. Plan was simple. Cross at the shallows, hole up in the old hunter cabin till dawn, then ride hard for Lafayette where Sheriff Tate owed Pa a favor. Elias knew these woods better than me, hunted them since he could walk, but water might buy us time. Hold on, I muttered to Mira, feeling her nod against my shoulder. A branch snapped too close, and I twisted in the saddle. There, a shadow darting between the elms, lantern light catching the barrel of his rifle. Damn it, he'd circled us. The river loomed ahead, black and roiling under the half-moon, its banks slick with spring rain. I reined in sharp, the horse skidding to a halt, spraying mud. Down, Mira, now. She slid off before I could help, boots sinking into the muck, her eyes wide but not panicked. We fight? Not yet. I swung down, tying the reins to a low branch, my hand fumbling for the pistol at my belt. Pa's old Colt, loaded but heavy as regret. The journal burned against my chest. If Elias got it, he'd twist every word into gospel, justify the killing as fate. Our great-grandpa Jedediah had been the first recorded, stringing up neighbors in the name of some divine purge during the fever of 32. Pa swore we'd broken the chain, but here we were, running from the proof. Elias's voice slithered from the trees again. Caleb, brother, come out. Let's talk like family. No anger now, just that oily calm, the kind that hid the storm. I pushed Mira behind a fallen log, its bark rough under my palms as I crouched low. The river churned, mocking us with its escape just yards away. Footsteps crunched, slow, deliberate. He was toying with us, savoring the hunt. Mira tugged my sleeve. The journal, burn it. End this, I shook my head, throat tight. Burning it meant erasing the warnings. The names of those who'd fought the curse before. But keeping it? That was bait. Elias burst from the underbrush then, rifle raised, his face a mask of shadows and madness. I fired first, the shot cracking like thunder, splintering bark near his shoulder. He didn't flinch, just laughed, low, triumphant as he lunged. We scrambled back, Mira's slingshot whirring, a stone glancing off his arm. It slowed him a heartbeat, enough for me to grab her and bolt for the water. Cold bit through my boots as we waded in, the current yanking at our legs. Elias fired once, twice, the bullets plowing furrows in the foam beside us. We made the far bank, collapsing in the reeds, soaked and gasping, but alive. As we pushed into the thicker woods beyond, I glanced back. He stood there, rifle lowered, watching, not pursuing, not yet. The journal's weight pulled at me like an anchor. We'd bought time, but the bloodline's pull was stronger than any river. Dawn couldn't come soon enough. I gripped the reins tighter as the horse's hooves churned the muddy trail, the lantern swinging wild from the saddle horn, casting jagged shadows on the underbrush. Elias rode ahead, his silhouette cutting through the pre-dawn fog like a blade, but I could feel the weight of his glance back at me every few minutes, checking if I'd bolt or break. We were deep in the backwoods now, miles from the Blackstone farm, chasing whispers of the old man's journal that Uncle Thorne swore held the key to ending this curse. My hands ached from the cold, but I wouldn't admit it. Not after what I'd done last night. The blood still crusting under my nails despite the river scrub. The path narrowed, branches clawing at my coat like skeletal fingers, and Elias pulled up short at a fork in the trail. This is it, he muttered, dismounting with a grunt that betrayed his limp from the war wound. He was the cautious one, always weighing risks like a merchant with scales. But tonight his eyes burned with that same reckless fire I'd seen in Pa before the hanging. The cabin's just beyond the ridge. You sure about this, Caleb? Once we cross that line, ain't no turning back. I swung down, boots sinking into the loam, and met his stare. Inside, my thoughts raced. What if it's all lies? What if opening that journal wakes something worse than the killings? But I nodded, voice steady. Pa died for this family. I'm not letting his blood be for nothing. We tethered the horses and pushed on foot, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and pine, my heart pounding a rhythm that drowned out the distant hoot of an owl. The cabin emerged from the mist like a forgotten grave, its timbers weathered black, door hanging ajar on rusted hinges. Elias drew his pistol first, the click echoing too loud in the silence while I clutched the knife at my belt, the one I'd used on Silas, its edge still whispering promises of more. We slipped inside, floorboards creaking under our weight, and the air turned stale, heavy with dust and something metallic, like old coins or spilled iron. A single candle flickered on a rough-hewn table, unlit by any hand we'd seen, its flame dancing as if breathing. "There," Elias whispered, nodding to a loose floorboard in the corner. He knelt, prying it up with his knife, revealing a hollow stuffed with yellowed pages bound in cracked leather. My breath caught the journal, every generation's sins scrawled in Pa's own hand. But as I reached for it, a floorboard groaned behind us, not from our steps. We spun, weapons raised, to face the shadowed figure in the doorway. Aunt Mira, her shawl clutched tight, eyes wide with a mix of fury and fear. "You fools," she hissed, stepping in, the door slamming shut on its own with a wind that carried no breeze. "That book's poisoned. It don't end the bloodline, it feeds it." Her voice cracked, and I saw the tremor in her hands, the same hands that had bandaged my wounds as a boy. She was the witty one, always with a sharp tongue to cut through our stubbornness, but now it trembled. "I followed you from the farm. Thorn's not the savior he claims. He's the next in line, same as your pa, same as me before I fought it." Elias lowered his pistol a fraction, but I kept the knife ready, mind whirling. If she's right, then Silas's death was just the start, and opening this will drag us all under. "Why hide it then?" I demanded, stepping closer, the candle's light carving hollows in her face. "If it's poison, burn it. End it now." Mira laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the walls. "Burn it? It's in us, boy. Every Blackstone born under that blood moon carries the killer's mark. Your pa tried to chain it with words, but it broke free. And now with you stirring it—" She trailed off, eyes flicking to the journal, then back to me. A shadow moved outside the window. Deer or something worse? And Elias cursed under his breath, holstering his gun to grab the book. We argued in low tones, voices overlapping like storm clouds. Elias pushing to read it, Mira pleading to bury it deeper, me torn between the pull of answers and the dread knotting my gut. The tension built, the cabin feeling smaller, walls pressing in until a sharp crack split the air, the journal's cover splitting as Elias forced it open, pages fanning out like dying leaves. Words blurred in the dim light, names, dates, rituals stained with what looked like blood. My name was there at the bottom, fresh ink as if written tonight. Before I could speak, Mira lunged, snatching a page, but Elias shoved her back, harder than he meant, her head cracking against the table. She slumped, eyes fluttering, and I froze, the knife heavy in my hand. Not again. Not her. The shadow outside grew bolder, scratching at the door, and Elias's face paled as he read aloud. "The fifth-born claims the line, or all fall." Our eyes met, the weight of generations crashing down, and I knew, whatever came next, the bloodline's killer wasn't just in the book. It was rising in me. The lantern's flame guttered in the draft, casting shadows that danced like accusations across the barn's weathered beams. I gripped the pitchfork tighter, its tines still slick from the mud outside, and stared at Elias Blackstone, my own cousin, blood of my blood, pinned against the hay bales by the weight of my glare. "You think I won't do it?" I whispered, my voice raw from the ride through the storm-swept fields. The rain hammered the tin roof above us, a relentless drumbeat that matched the thunder in my chest. Elias laughed, a wet, choking sound that bubbled up from his throat. Blood trickled from the gash on his forehead where I'd struck him earlier, mixing with the sweat beading on his brow. He was always the sly one, the charmer who could talk his way out of a noose, but tonight his eyes held no silver tongue, only the wild gleam I'd seen in our grandfather's portrait, the one hidden in the attic. "Do it then, Caleb," he rasped, not even trying to twist free. "Finish what the blood demands. Every generation, one killer." Pa thought it was him, but it skipped. Landed on me. "Now it's yours, boy. Feel it calling?" I hesitated, the pitchfork hovering inches from his chest. The air in the barn smelled of damp earth and something sharper. Iron, like the scent that clung to the family ledger I'd found buried under the floorboards of the old homestead. Pages yellowed with entries spanning decades. 1792. Josiah Blackstone. 3 souls claimed by fever that left throats slit and eyes wide in the moonlight. 1821. His son Amos, the miller's wife, and her children vanishing into the Wabash River, weighted with stones. And now, the blank line for 1857 waiting for a name. Elias had filled it already, or so the whispers in town said. Old man Hargrove found in his smokehouse, gutted like a hog, and little Eliza from the crossroads, her doll floating belly up in the creek. My hand trembled. I'd ridden hard from Indianapolis after the telegram, The one from Widow Hargrove begging me to come home, saying Elias had gone wrong in the head again. But I knew better. The Bloodline's curse, they called it in hushed tones around the quilting frames and tavern stools. A devil's bargain our ancestor made with some wandering preacher during the war, trading souls for fertile land that never blighted. Pa had fought it, drowned himself in whiskey until the bottle took him instead. Ma said it was mercy. I said it was cowardice. You rode all this way to play hero? Elias sneered, shifting just enough to make the hay crunch beneath him. His boot nudged the lantern, sending it skittering closer to the straw. Flames licked at the edges, hungry. The Blackstones don't get heroes, Caleb. We get the blade. Or the rope. Town's already talking. Sheriff's got men combing the woods. They'll hang me at dawn, but not before they come for you. Blood tells, cousin. It always does. I lunged, but not with the pitchfork. My free hand clamped over his mouth, silencing the taunt as I dragged him toward the back door. The storm outside roared approval, wind whipping branches like lashes. We burst into the night, rain blinding me as I hauled him toward the riverbank, the same muddy stretch where Amos had done his work decades ago. Elias struggled but weakly, feverish maybe, or the weight of what he'd become sapping his fight. In my mind, the ledger flipped open again, ink bleeding like wounds. If I let him go, the curse jumped to me. If I ended it here, the blood demanded payment all the same. The river churned black under the lightning flashes, swollen from days of downpour. I shoved him to his knees at the edge, the pitchfork forgotten in the mud. Tell me how to stop it, I demanded, my voice lost in the gale. There has to be a way, something Pa didn't tell you. Elias's eyes met mine, no madness now, just pity. Stop it, fool, it's not a curse to break. It's a gift to wield. He lunged suddenly, not at me but at the water, diving headlong into the torrent before I could grab him. The current swallowed him whole, a final ripple mocking my outstretched hand. I stood there, soaked to the bone as the sheriff's lanterns bobbed in the distance, closing in. The ledger's blank line burned in my thoughts. One killer per generation. Elias was gone, but the hunger stirred, faint as a whisper in my veins. Dawn would bring questions, accusations. I'd have to run or claim what was mine. The lantern's flame flickered as I crouched in the shadowed corner of the old mill, the air thick with the scent of damp wood and rusting iron. Elias's labored breathing echoed off the walls, each rasp a reminder that we'd pushed him too far that night. Keep it down, I whispered, my hand clamping over his mouth before he could protest. Outside, the posse's lanterns bobbed like fireflies through the fog rolling off the white river, their shouts carrying faint but closing in. We'd ditched the horses 2 miles back, but the mud had betrayed our tracks. Damn the spring thaw. I could feel the weight of the journal in my coat pocket, its leather cover worn smooth from generations of Blackstones hiding their sins. Father had sworn it was just family lore, tall tales to scare the young ones straight, but the pages I'd skimmed by moonlight told a different truth. Every firstborn son, marked by that peculiar birthmark on the left shoulder, carried the urge. The killer's itch, they called it in the faded ink. And now, with Elias bleeding from the gash on his leg, I wondered if I was next in line to scratch it bloody. Tom, we can't stay here, Elias hissed when I eased my hand away, his face pale under the grime. He was the cautious one. Always had been since we were boys racing through the cornfields, but tonight his eyes burned with that same reckless fire I'd seen in myself after the deed at the crossroads. We'd meant to stop the sheriff's man before he could spread word of the barn fire, but things had spiraled. A struggle, a fall, and now blood on our hands that wasn't ours to spill lightly. I nodded, peering through a crack in the boarded window. The mill wheel creaked lazily in the current, a skeletal arm grinding against the night. 3 riders dismounted at the tree line, their boots sucking into the muck as they fanned out. If we bolted for the river, the current might carry us downstream, away from the lanterns and the nooses waiting in Bloomington. But Elias could barely stand, his wound from the thorn thicket festering already, and the journal weighed heavier than lead. Burn it, and we'd lose the only map to breaking this curse. Keep it, and it damned us both. Help me up, he grunted, gripping my arm. I hauled him to his feet, ignoring the twinge in my own shoulder where the mark itched like a fresh brand. We'd argued the whole ride here, him wanting to turn ourselves in, confess it as an accident born of the family's shadow, me insisting we run, find the old hermit in the hills who'd whispered of a ritual to sever the bloodline's chain. But plans had a way of crumbling, like the first one back at the farm when we'd tried to bury the evidence and unearthed grandfather's hidden blade instead, its edge still stained from 37. A beam of light sliced through the mill's doorway, freezing us in place. "Blackstone, we know you're in there." The voice was Jed Harlan's, thick with that frontier drawl and the grudge from when my uncle had courted his sister years back. Footsteps crunched closer, deliberate, like wolves circling a lame deer. Elias's hand trembled on my sleeve, but I shoved him toward the back wall, where a rusted ladder led to the loft. "Go, I'll draw him off." He shook his head, stubborn as ever. "Not without you, brother. We're in this blood together." The words hung there, simple and true, cutting through the fear gnawing at my gut. For a heartbeat, the itch in my shoulder quieted, replaced by something fiercer. Not the killer's rage, but the grit to defy it. I grabbed a loose plank from the floor, its nails glinting wicked in the dim light, and kicked open the side door. The night air rushed in cold and wet, carrying the posse's curses as I bolted into the fog. Behind me, Elias limped up the ladder, the journal safe in his pocket for now. But as bullets whined past my ear, splintering bark, I knew the river wouldn't be our salvation, not yet. The bloodline demanded its due, and we'd have to outrun it together or carve a new path through the bones of our kin. The lantern's flame guttered in the draft, casting jagged shadows across the cellar walls as I gripped the shovel tighter, my palms slick with sweat despite the chill. Elias's body lay sprawled at my feet, his eyes staring blankly at the low beams overhead, the fresh wound in his chest still oozing dark blood onto the dirt floor. I'd done it. Buried the family secret deeper than Pa ever had, but the weight of it pressed on me like the earth waiting to swallow us both. Upstairs, the house creaked under the wind's assault, and I could hear Ma moving about, her footsteps deliberate, as if she knew exactly what I'd just confessed to in the dead of night. I knelt beside him, whispering the words I'd rehearsed in my mind since boyhood. "One killer per generation. Elias, it's our blood, our curse." But he wasn't my brother. Not truly. Not after what he'd uncovered in the attic trunk. The yellowed letters spelling out the line from Great-Grandpa Amos, who'd strung up the peddler in 29 for less than a stolen horse. Elias had come to the farm a month ago, posing as a distant cousin, but his questions cut too close, prying at the locked doors of our history. I'd seen the madness in his eyes when he cornered me in the barn, demanding I end the cycle. "You're next, Caleb," he'd said, his voice breaking. "Don't let it take you like it took them." The shovel bit into the soil with a dull thud, each scoop pulling me further from the man I might have been. Outside, the storm raged on, thunder rumbling like the Blackstone ghosts rising from their graves. Ma's voice called down the stairs, sharp and unyielding. "Caleb, you down there fixing that leak?" I froze, the dirt caking my fingers, and forced a steadiness into my reply. "Just about done, Ma. Be up soon." She didn't press. She never did. In our family, secrets were like the roots under the fields, twisted, unseen, but they held everything together. As I dug deeper, the lantern light caught something glinting in the far corner. The old hunting knife, its blade etched with the family initials, BS for Blackstone, stained from uses best forgotten. Elias had found it first, waving it like proof during our argument, claiming it was the tool of every killer before me. "Your pa used it on that drifter in 47, he'd spat. "And now you? For what, protecting a lie?" I'd wrested it from him then, the struggle ending with him slumped against the wall, gasping his last. Now staring at it, I felt the pull, the same itch that had driven Uncle Jed to the riverbank massacre in 51, leaving 3 men floating face down for accusing him of rustling. I paused, wiping my brow, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and iron tang. Footsteps echoed again. Ma descending the stairs this time, her silhouette filling the doorway. She was a wiry woman, her face lined like old leather, eyes that missed nothing. "Boy," she said, voice low, "you've got that look. The one your pa had before the sheriff came." I straightened, shovel in hand, but she waved it off, stepping closer to peer at the hole. "Elias ain't the first stranger to sniff around our dirt." "What did he know?" "Too much," I muttered, glancing at the body. She nodded, unsurprised, and knelt to help drag him toward the grave, her hands steady where mine trembled. "Then it's done. But remember, Caleb, the bloodline don't break easy. Every generation, one killer. Yours now." Her words hung heavy, not a curse but a fact, like the harvest yield or the river's flood. We worked in silence, the storm outside mirroring the one building in my chest until Elias was covered. The earth padded smooth as if he'd never come. By dawn, the rain had eased, leaving the field sodden and the air crisp. I stepped out onto the porch, the knife tucked in my belt, feeling its weight shift with each breath. Ma joined me, handing over a tin of coffee, black as sin. Folks in town'll ask after him, she said, sipping slowly. Say he left sudden like chasing opportunity west. I nodded, but my mind raced ahead, to the next stranger, the next prying eye. The Blackstones had endured wars and feuds, but this legacy, it was carving me hollow, one secret at a time. As the sun crested the hills, a rider appeared on the horizon, dust kicking up from his horse's hooves despite the mud. My hand drifted to the knife, instinct sharpening like a whetstone. Ma noticed, her lips thinning. Easy, boy. Might be nothing. But in our blood, nothing ever was. The rider drew closer, his face unfamiliar, and I wondered if Elias had sent word before he came. If this was the reckoning I'd buried but couldn't escape. The lantern's flame flickered as I slammed the door behind us, the wood splintering under my shoulder like brittle bone. Elias gasped beside me, clutching his side where the bullet had grazed him. Shallow, but enough to paint his shirt crimson. We can't stay here, Jacob, he wheezed, eyes darting to the shadows pooling in the corners of the old mill. Outside, the night pressed in, thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and something fouler like the grave unearthed. I'd dragged us into this forsaken place on the edge of the Wabash, thinking the crumbling walls would buy us time. But now every creak of the beams whispered of pursuit. The Blackstones didn't forgive loose ends, and I just cut the biggest one yet by shooting Cousin Harlan in the leg as we fled the family gathering. I leaned against a rusted beam, my breath ragged, the weight of the family ledger heavy in my coat pocket. Pages upon pages of names, dates, and confessions, every generation's shadow laid bare. Father had tried to burn it years ago, but the fire wouldn't take, as if the ink itself bled defiance. They'll come for it, I muttered, more to myself than Elias. He was the only one who'd believed me when I said the bloodline wasn't a curse from God, but a choice passed down like a rusted knife. One killer per line, to keep the land, the secrets, the power. Harlan had been next in line, smug with his plans for the upcoming harvest festival, where he'd claim his first offering to bind the family's hold on the township. But I'd seen the ledger's truth, our great-grandfather starting it all in 32, slaughtering rivals to seize the mill from the river folk. No divine right, just human greed sharpened to a point. Elias slid down the wall, his face pale under the grime. He was the cautious one, always had been. My younger brother by 3 years, with a healer's hands that mended more than they harmed. You should have let me talk to him, he said, voice steady despite the pain. Harlan's family. We could have reasoned. A sharp crack from upstream cut him off like thunder rolling too close. Not thunder, hoofbeats. They were tracking us already, lanterns bobbing like fireflies through the mist. I cursed under my breath, peering through a gap in the boards. 3 riders, Uncle Thorne leading, his shotgun glinting in the moonlight. The challenge wasn't just the river's flood swelling behind the mill, threatening to sweep us into the current if we stayed too long. It was the family's unyielding grip, the way they'd turn brother against brother to preserve the line. I grabbed Elias's arm, hauling him up. Reason with a snake? He'd have gutted us both to keep that tradition alive. We moved deeper into the mill, footsteps muffled by decades of dust and chaff. The air grew cooler, laced with the rot of forgotten grain sacks. My mind raced. The ledger held the key not just to ending it, but to exposing the Blackstones' lies to the town. If we could reach the preacher's house by dawn, show him the proof of the killings tied to our land deeds, it might shatter the hold. But first, survival. I spotted a trap door in the floor, half concealed by debris. Father's old escape route, he'd whispered once, drunk on cider. Down here, I said, prying it open with the butt of my pistol. The darkness below yawned like a mouth, but it was better than facing Thorne's barrel. Elias hesitated, wincing as he bent low. What if it's a dead end? The river's rising, water'll flood it. He was right. I could hear the Wabash murmuring angrily now, lapping at the foundation stones. But staying meant a fight we couldn't win. Not with Elias bleeding and me down to 3 bullets. Trust me, I replied, the words tasting like a lie even to my own ears. I didn't trust much anymore, not the family, not the ledger's promises of redemption. Yet as I lowered myself into the damp tunnel, the cool earth pressing close, I felt the grit of it all. The ingenuity of desperation, carving paths where none existed. Elias followed, the trapdoor thudding shut above us, sealing out the light. In the pitch black, his hand found mine, a silent pact. We'd adapt or drown trying. The tunnel sloped sharply, mud sucking at our boots with each step. Water seeped in from the sides, ankle deep now, carrying the chill of the river. I led, one hand trailing the rough-hewn wall, my thoughts a whirl of what-ifs. What if Harlan had lied about the ledger's power? What if burning it truly ended the cycle, freeing us from the killer's shadow? Elias's labored breathing echoed behind me, a reminder of the cost already paid. "Jacob," he whispered, "remember the story Mother told? About the first Blackstone refusing the mark?" I did. A tale of a man who walked away only to return bloodied, the family dragging him back. But that was before me. Before the ledger in my pocket, its pages a map to unraveling it all. A low rumble shook the tunnel, the riders no doubt smashing through the mill's doors. Shouts filtered down, muffled but urgent. Thorne's gravel voice calling our names like a hunter's call. The water rose to our knees, slowing us, but I pushed on, the faint glow of an exit ahead, a grate overlooking the riverbank. Freedom or a trap? My heart pounded as I gripped the iron bars, testing their give. Rusted but solid, Elias slumped against the lantern's flame, guttered in the draft, casting jagged shadows across the cellar walls as I gripped the shovel tighter. My palms slick with sweat that had nothing to do with the summer heat seeping through the floorboards above. Elias's body lay slumped against the stone, his eyes glassy and unseeing, the gash in his throat still oozing dark blood that pooled like spilled ink. I couldn't look away from it, from the way his fingers twitched one last time as if reaching for the knife I'd buried in his chest after he'd lunged at me with that wild, cursed gleam in his eye. The Blackstone curse, they called it. Every generation birthing one monster, one killer who couldn't be tamed. And now, staring at my brother's corpse, I knew it had skipped father and landed square on me. I drove the shovel into the dirt floor, the iron biting deep with a satisfying crunch, but my mind raced faster than my arms could work. Upstairs, the house creaked under the weight of secrets. Mother's Bible hidden in the attic, its pages marked with the names of the damned, Grandfather Elias, who vanished after gutting the neighbor's boy, Great-Uncle Josiah, hanged for poisoning the well. I'd found it last week after Elias started whispering about the blood call, his nights spent pacing the fields with that rusted scythe. He thought he was next, the killer in our line, but tonight he'd turned on me instead, ranting that I was the one, the pure vessel. The fight had been quick, brutal. His hands around my throat, my knee in his gut, the knife from the kitchen block flashing in the moonlight through the window. Now he was dead, and the weight of it settled in my chest like a stone. Dirt flew in rhythmic arcs as I dug, the hole widening into a shallow grave. The air down here smelled of damp earth and iron tang, thick enough to choke on. Every scrape echoed, too loud in the silence, and I paused to listen. Nothing but the distant hoot of an owl outside, and the faint tick of the clock in the parlor above. Pa was away in town, trading horses at the market. He'd be back by dawn, reeking of whiskey and lies, none the wiser unless I slipped. But slips weren't allowed in a family like ours. The bloodline demanded silence, burial, and the next son to carry on. I was 22, unwed, the last hope for the farm after Elias's accident. If they knew I'd killed my own brother, even in self-defense, the town would string me up like they did Josiah. Sweat stung my eyes as I worked deeper, the shovel striking something hard. A root, maybe, or bone from whatever poor soul Elias had practiced on in secret. My thoughts twisted back to last harvest, when the hired hand went missing after Elias cornered him in the barn. I'd told myself it was fever, not murder, but the dreams had started then. Me with blood on my hands, the rush of it hot and right. Was that the curse waking? Or just fear? I heaved Elias's body into the pit, his limp form thudding against the sides, one arm flopping out like an accusation. Covering him was mercy, I told myself. Better the earth take him than the law. But as the dirt settled over his face, a strange calm washed over me, the kind that follows a storm, leaving everything sharper, clearer. By the time the grave was filled and padded smooth, the first gray light of dawn filtered through the cellar grate. I scattered straw over the mound, then climbed the stairs, locking the door behind me. The house felt emptier, the air heavier, as if Elias's ghost already lingered in the rafters. I washed the blood from my hands in the basin, watching the water run pink down the drain, and wondered if this was how it started for all of them. The kill that bound you to the line. Pa would return soon, clap me on the back, ask after Elias. I'd say he ran off chasing dreams in Chicago like boys do. But inside, the question burned. Was I the killer now, or had I just become the guardian of one? The mirror in the hall caught my reflection as I passed, Eyes too steady, hands too steady, and I turned away, grabbing my hat for the fields. The work waited, and so did the bloodline. I gripped the reins tighter as the horse's hooves churned the mud along the Wabash River Trail, the lantern swinging wild from the saddle horn. Elias rode point, his silhouette cutting sharp against the moonlit water, but I could see the slump in his shoulders. That telltale sign he'd been nursing doubts since we left the cabin at dusk. We'd buried Ma that morning, her grave shallow under the oak she'd planted decades ago. And now this. Whispers from the river traders about Harlan Blackstone, my own uncle, stirring up trouble with the Shawnee remnants upstream. Every generation, they said. One killer to keep the bloodline pure. I spat into the dark, tasting the lie of it, but the weight of the Colt in my belt said otherwise. The ford came up fast, shallower than last spring's rains had promised, but the current pulled vicious, foaming white around the rocks. Elias reined in, his voice low over the rush. We cross now or we lose the trail by dawn. Your call, Jacob. He was cautious like that, always measuring the risk, but tonight his eyes held a glint I'd seen in Pa before the fever took him. The kind that came from knowing too much family history. I nodded, urging my mare forward, the water climbing to her flanks in icy sheets. Halfway across, she stumbled, a cry escaping her as the riverbed gave way. I hauled back, cursing, but Elias was already splashing toward us, rope uncoiling from his saddle like a serpent. We made the far bank soaked and shivering, the horse limping but alive. I dismounted to check her foreleg, the skin torn where a jagged stone had bit deep. She's done for the night, I muttered, wrapping it with the strip of cloth from my kerchief. Elias built a small fire under the overhang of a willow thicket, sparks dancing up to join the stars. We didn't speak of the blood on my hands from Ma's last breath or the letter she'd pressed into my palm, scrawled words about Harlan's sins, the killings that skipped no generation, and how the Blackstones had claimed land from the natives with lead and grudge. But the challenge hung between us. Uncle Harlan, holed up in his mill by the rapids, rallying men against the incoming rail surveyors. If he struck first, it'd drag us all into a war we couldn't win, not with the law sniffing closer after that trader's murder last month. As the flames crackled, Elias pulled a flask from his coat, the whiskey burning smooth down my throat. He ain't just kin, Jacob. He's the storm we've been running from since we were boys. I stared into the fire, seeing Pa's face in the embers, brave to a fault, gunned down in 49 over a disputed claim. The family curse, they called it in hushed tones at the general store, but it felt more like a chain, each link forged in vengeance. We'd come to end it, or die trying, but the river's roar mocked our plans. My early scheme, ride in quiet at night, confront Harlan alone, had backfired before we even started. Scouts from his camp had spotted our dust trail miles back, forcing this detour. Dawn broke gray and relentless, mist curling off the water like ghosts. We pressed on foot now, leading the lame horse through the underbrush, the mill's silhouette looming 2 miles ahead. My boots sank in the loam, each step pulling at the wound in my side from a branch snag yesterday. A reminder that carelessness cost blood out here. Elias scouted ahead, his wit turning sharp in the tension. If Harlan's got that new repeating rifle, we'll be buzzard food before we say howdy. I smirked despite the ache, clapping his shoulder. Then we don't say howdy, we say goodbye. The tree line thinned as we crested the ridge, the mill's wheel groaning against the current below. Smoke rose from the chimney and figures moved like shadows in the yard. Harlan's men armed and watchful. We'd adapted on the fly. Instead of a direct charge, we'd circle to the sluice gate, flood the lower yard to scatter them. But as we crept closer, a shot cracked the air, splintering bark inches from Elias's head. He dropped, rolling behind a stump, and I fired blind into the mist, the Colt's report echoing like judgment. Harlan's voice boomed from the porch, gravelly and unyielding. That you, nephew? Come to claim your birthright? I reloaded, heart pounding, the river's rage mirroring the storm in my veins. This wasn't just land or grudge, it was the bloodline breaking or binding us forever. Elias met my eyes, nodding. Together, or not at all. We moved as one, the flood plan be damned, charging into the fray with grit born of too many graves. The lantern's flame guttered in the draft, casting jagged shadows across the barn's weathered beams. I gripped the pitchfork tighter, its tines still slick with the mud from the fields. But now they felt like an extension of my trembling arms. Elias Blackstone, my own cousin, the one they'd whispered about since we were boys, stood there in the doorway, his silhouette broad and unyielding against the stormy night. Rain hammered the tin roof like accusations, drowning out the distant thunder. "You think you can end it, Jacob?" he said, his voice low, almost amused as if this were just another family squabble over landlines. But I knew better. The blood on his coat wasn't from a hunting accident. It was from Uncle Harlan, gutted, in his sleep not 2 hours ago, the latest in our cursed line. I backed up a step, my boot catching on a loose hay bale. Every generation, they said. One killer born to the Blackstones, marked by the old man's eyes, cold as river stones. Pa had been the last, stringing up rivals in the war's shadow, and now Elias carried that weight, or so the town gossips claimed. But I'd seen the ledgers hidden in the attic, debts piling like storm clouds, the farm mortgaged to faceless bankers in Chicago. Elias wasn't just killing. He was carving a path to keep us afloat, or so he told himself. "It ain't right," I muttered, my voice cracking like dry timber. The pitchfork wavered, but I leveled it anyway. He was family, but Harlan had been too, and the sheriff's posse was closing in from the east road. I could hear their horses' muffled whinnies over the gale. He stepped forward, unhurried, wiping a hand across his stubbled jaw. Water dripped from his hat brim, pooling at his feet like spilled ink. Right? What's right for a man when the land's dying and the banks are circling like vultures? Harlan was selling us out, talking to those railmen, ready to hand over the acres for a fistful of promises. His eyes, those damn eyes, locked on mine, daring me to swing. I hesitated, the weight of our shared blood pulling at me. We'd grown up wrestling in these fields, sharing secrets under the harvest moon. But tonight, with the air thick as sin, I saw the fracture. The killer wasn't born. He was forged in desperation, one choice at a time. Lightning cracked outside, illuminating the scars on his knuckles, marks from brawls I'd nursed with whiskey and lies. "Put it down, Jacob. We finish this together, or the posse takes us both." My heart pounded, a drumbeat urging flight or fight. The barn door rattled in the wind, and for a split second I glimpsed the rope hanging from the rafter, the one Elias had used on Harlan. No. I lunged, the pitchfork thrusting forward like a spear. He twisted aside faster than a shadow, his hand clamping my wrist. We grappled, breath hot and ragged, tumbling into the straw. Pain bloomed in my side as his elbow connected, but I drove my knee up, hearing him grunt. The lantern tipped, oil spilling in a fiery arc. Flames licked the hay, spreading with hungry whispers. Smoke stung my eyes, and Elias coughed, his grip loosening just enough. I scrambled free, grabbing a shovel from the wall, blunt but solid. He rose, silhouetted by the growing blaze, his face a mask of fury and something like regret. "Fool boy," he rasped, charging again. Our tools clashed, sparks flying amid the roar of fire. The barn was awakening to its own pyre, beams creaking like old bones. I swung wide, connecting with his shoulder. He staggered, but not before his fist grazed my jaw, stars exploding in my vision. Through the haze, I saw the truth etched in the flickering light. The bloodline wasn't a curse of killers, but of survivors too stubborn to yield. Elias slumped against a post, clutching his arm, blood seeping through his fingers. "Go," he wheezed, nodding toward the side door. "Take the horse, tell him I did it all." The flames climbed higher, devouring the walls, and the distant shouts of the posse cut through the storm. I dropped the shovel, throat tight. Leaving him meant carrying the weight alone. Next generation's killer, or just a man with ghosts. Rain lashed in as I bolted into the night, the barn collapsing behind me in a thunderous sigh, sealing our family's fractured legacy in ash. The lantern's flame guttered low in the damp cellar air, casting jagged shadows across the stone walls as I drove the shovel into the earth one final time. My arms burned, sweat stinging the cuts on my hands, but I couldn't stop. Not with Elias's labored breaths echoing behind me, each one a ragged reminder that time was slipping away like the soil crumbling under the blade. The hole was deep enough, now, Or it had to be. We'd dug through roots and clay for hours, the weight of the Blackstone legacy pressing heavier than the dirt itself. "Tom, hurry," Elias whispered, his voice a threadbare rasp from where he slumped against the wall, clutching the bandaged wound at his side. Blood seeped through the makeshift dressing, dark and accusing, but his eyes, those sharp, unyielding eyes that had guided us through the fevered nights, held steady. He wasn't the killer in our line, not like the whispers said every generation birthed, but he'd fought like one to keep me from becoming it. "The sun's rising. They'll come?" I nodded, though my throat tightened at the thought of Pa's men, those loyal hounds of the family estate, scouring the woods by now. We'd fled the manor at midnight, me with the locket clutched in my fist, the one etched with the curse, or the truth depending on who you asked, and Elias trailing, weakened from the brawl that had spilled us both into this hidden root cellar beneath the old mill. The challenge wasn't some rival gang or storm. It was the blood itself, the unyielding pull that had claimed Uncle Josiah last harvest, turning brother against brother in a haze of inherited madness. We'd planned to bury the locket here, sever the chain before it wrapped around my neck too, but the ground fought us, as if the earth knew and resisted. Dropping the shovel, I knelt and pried open the locket. The tiny portrait of Great-Grandpa Blackstone staring up with eyes that mirrored my own, cold, calculating. Inside, folded tight, was the letter we'd found in the family Bible. Not a curse, but a confession, detailing how the first killer had poisoned the well to claim the land, and how each heir after had twisted that greed into murder to hold it. Elias had read it aloud by firelight 2 nights back, his voice steady as he pieced it together. "It's not fate, Tom, it's choice. We end it by choosing different." But choice had cost us. The early plan, to confront Pa at the manor and burn the records, had backfired spectacularly. He'd laughed, called it boys' folly, then set his men on us with clubs and pistols. Elias took the blow meant for me and we'd run. The locket our only proof, our only weapon. Now, with the first gray light seeping through the cellar's cracks, I pressed the letter into the dirt at the hole's bottom, covering it with a handful of soil before snapping the locket shut and dropping it in after. Elias coughed, sliding closer, his hand gripping my shoulder with surprising strength. "Cover it quick. Then we go west like we said. Start over in Illinois, away from this poison ground." I shoveled the earth back, each scoop a defiance, the rhythm steadying my racing heart. The image burned in my mind, the locket vanishing under the mound, a small grave for the monster our family had fed for generations. But as the last bit of dirt settled, a distant shout pierced the quiet, Pa's voice barking orders from the mill above. They were here. "Up the back way," Elias urged, hauling himself to his feet with a grimace. We scrambled for the narrow tunnel we'd used to enter, the air thick with the scent of wet stone and regret. I supported him as we emerged into the underbrush, the forest alive with dawn's chorus, but the consequence lingered like a shadow. The blood was buried, but the stain? That would follow us, a quiet doubt in every new dawn. We pushed on, the manor fading behind the trees, 2 brothers bound not by legacy's curse but by the grit to break it. Elias glanced back once, his witty spark returning in a pained grin. "Think they'll write songs about us, Tom? The Blackstones who chose the plow over the grave?" I managed to laugh, the weight lifting just enough to breathe. "Only if we live to tell it." And as the sun crested, we vanished into the wildwood. The killer's line ended, not with a blaze, but with the simple act of walking away.